What up, everybody? Welcome to the IAG Thursday thing. This thing we do every Thursday where we hang out, talk about whatever's going on for the week. And sometimes we have super cool people on here. And this week, we are super blessed. We have a pillar of the community, I guess would be a good way of putting this. This guy's been around. He has seen it all. He's done basically all of it. He's worked with almost every major brand you can think of within the Subaru community. And he's been around for a minute, and he's just a heap of knowledge. And we're barely going to scratch the surface with this guy today, but we're going to try and have a good time here. So, I mean, without further ado, welcome to the show, Mike McGinnis. What up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm so stoked to have you on here. You're somebody I've been honestly like posting pictures and crap of your cars and stuff for years, way back when I was, just a youngling on Nasiak. And it's you've been one of those cornerstones of the community for a very, very long time, and it's super cool to have you on here and be able to chat with you. And some of us who have been around a really long time, it's really nice to see that some of the people that we looked up to for a really long time are still here.
I mean, I'm just thankful I'm still here as well. So yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of them who aren't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's not every day that you get to do what you do. You really love to do for this many years. So I certainly appreciate it. Dude,
I had to beat my head against the wall to finally turn this into something I can consider a career. And it's not easy. Not very many of us get to pull this off, and we're the ones who do, we're very blessed. And sometimes it's hard to remember that when you're late nights or silly stuff going on, or when it gets businessy. Sometimes you just got to remind yourself that 18-year-old you would be very proud. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, like those times do pop up, but I mean, very rarely. I definitely know how and appreciate how lucky I am, for sure.
That's sick. So what are you up to these days, man? Your background is mostly in tuning that I'm aware of, though you have built some crazy stuff over the years, so you definitely have a sick background in building also, but you tend to be on the tuning side of things for the most part. I mean, it's springtime, so I'm sure you're dealing with all sorts of things with builds and things going on right now.
Oh no, that's all done. Everybody plans ahead. All the cars have been tuned for months. No, you know how it goes. Definitely have done a lot of tuning over the years. That's kind of how things got started. I did end up starting a business that sold parts, ended up being a full service performance facility. Did that for 12 years. More recently,
let's start. Hold on, before you go too far into that, let's start from the beginning here. Then let's just roll right into the story. We got warranty on here now too. So,
wow. Hey, Mike.
Howdy.
So, I mean, let's start from the beginning. First off, like, what got you into cars and really started you rolling in this direction? Let's go way back to little Mike. And
sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, little kid playing with Matchbox cars, that kind of thing is kind of how it starts. But as I got older, I lived in Manhattan, and we didn't have a car. So it wasn't until I was in high school that we had cars and we're driving around instead of taking the bus or the subway. So it was something that I kind of got into more later. My first car was the cheapest thing that got me around, and I was super into racing bikes at the time. Bicycles, like mountain biking.
Yeah.
And then when
did you get your first car?
My parents will deny this if asked, but I went to a school that was kind of far away, and so I was driving to school a little before I had a license for a bit.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so
You gotta do what you gotta do. What year was that? Are you willing to tell me?
oh my goodness, 95.
Oh, that wasn't that bad.
So so I'm 15, getting myself back and forth to school. Super into bikes, but back then on Speed Vision, if you stayed up late enough, you could see
Oh, yeah.
World Rally Championship, and they would
Yes.
do, like their kind of quick wrap up of each event. And the first time I caught that, I think that was really the big thing for me because my parents were kind of into watching IndyCar, and we were lucky enough to go to a couple races over the course of my childhood. But
That's cool.
it as cool as it was just like this foreign thing. They're practically like a spaceship compared to what you see on the road. So
Yep.
it doesn't really feel like, you can kind of build one of these on your own or ever have one,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like pie in the sky. And then you watch WRC, and when you're young and don't really fully understand what goes into these cars, it's like, yeah, they like took a Subaru and they did a bunch of stuff to it, and that's it. And clearly there's a lot more going on at that level, but at the
That's all it
time,
was, though.
yeah, at the time it was like, something I could relate to a lot more, and feel like I could maybe aspire to, and maybe someday I could have a Subaru and drive it around in the woods, not necessarily WRC, but I think that was really kind of the big thing for me. And then the WRX was coming to the US, and this was around the time I finished school and had a job and was ready to get a car, and with some help from my folks, ended up getting a nice car because they kind of saw that I had gone to school for information technology, so I had some computer background, decided that's not really how I wanted to spend the rest of my life, was going to do computer stuff, and they helped me get this car, and basically just through starting to work on it on my own and with some friends that I lived with, things kind of went from there. But at the time, so this was April 2001 was when the first deliveries of O2 model year WRXs were coming in, and I said, I don't care what color, with the first one that shows up, I want it. And so I got one real early, and barely had any money to do anything to it, but was doing things like making friends with Tom at Cartboy, and actually, getting a short throw shifter, and that's how long I've known him.
From the
and
beginning.
then
This is some ground level stuff for what we know as the Subaru community today.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I ended up taking my school skills and doing website work for a shop called Z1 Auto in Long Island, which is no longer around as far as I know. But like I did their parts website to sell Subaru parts, and I think I ended up getting like Turbo XS RFL blow-off valve was one of my first mods, again, because I thought that that was the coolest thing to do at the time.
You got to make those. You only got 2 blow-off valves back in the day that anybody ran. It was a Turbo XS RFL or the HKS SSQV.
Yep. You picked a team and you were stuck with it. That was it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of how that started out, modding that car, and then as I worked more and had a little money to do more stuff, then it came time where I had to tune the car. And I was in Western New York at that point, where I went to school, and there was absolutely nobody anywhere near there who could tune the car. And I know I'm certainly not alone in this, that sometimes that's how things start, just out of necessity. But the only person I had even heard of at that point that some guys I knew were getting tuned by was there was someone who would fly in from California to a shop in New Jersey, and it was like a 7-hour drive and had to be on a certain day. And I was like, this is nuts. I'm not doing this. So, yeah, I picked up a Turbo XS U-Tech right when they came out.
Ooh, there's some stuff too.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, this was a piggyback system that was user tunable, using like a DOS software interface. It was pretty bare bones, but compared to what had been out prior to that, this was like a huge leap forward. People were using like an SAFC, like something that could barely skew math readings.
Every once in a while, you'd see Unichip too, which,
Sure.
yep. But
So-
yeah, that was the first like thing you would buy to get a tune. This was pre-access port. Like people don't understand how crazy things were back in the day. When's the last time you saw one of those on a car?
Man, it's probably been about 8 years, I would say. Every once in a while, they'll pop up, and someone will say they don't have an access port, they don't know how the car's tuned, and you go to read the stock ECU,
Yep.
and it's a stock tune, but they have like all these mods on it, and then you look and you see that the floorboard, like the carpet, is raised on the passenger side, and then you know what's going on.
So how we used to find them all the time is, somebody'd come in, something was funky, and we'd be trying to figure out what was going on. And one of the things we would always do is, try to take a log or something, and it was acting all crazy. And a lot of times we'd send the log over to like whoever our tuner was at the time, whether it be Graham or whoever, and we'd send the log over to them. They'd be like, man, this thing's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And we'd lift we'd look at the ECU, and sure as shit, there'd be a UTEC sitting there. We were seeing them all the way up to like 2017, still shoved under there. Like, oh my God, you'd pull that off, do a basic tune, car was fine.
That's an eternity.
Yeah, I mean, for the time though, what it could do was pretty cool. Like you had full tuning control, and you had actually the ability to tune fuel instead of just kind of skewing it in some funky way.
Yep.
It certainly wasn't perfect, and certainly is far from what's available now. But so at the time, I had like intake exhaust, stock turbo. And there were 2 local guys who had bought this like stage 4 package of the day, which had a VF30 or VF34 turbo, which is kind of like, I don't know, like 18G-ish size for folks who weren't around back then. And it came with a unit chip and a tune for it, and some STI pink injectors and a fuel pump and a front mount and this and that. And it was kind of like the big bad package of the day. And I self-tuned my UTEC very carefully over a significant period of time. And I raced against those guys and completely smoked them on the Snock Turbo. And that was kind of very eye-opening for them and for me, because it was not at all what I expected to happen. And I think that kind of really started to show me that the tuning portion was as important as the parts that you got.
Yep.
And then from there, it was kind of like, well, why is your car faster than mine? Who tuned your car? And well, I did myself. And at this point, I'm thinking like, this is not something I would ever do for someone else, because I'm tinkering with my own car. If it breaks, it breaks. It's on me. But, I don't feel like I'm someone who should be tinkering with someone else's investment. So I basically, I ended up getting eventually like injectors and a VF30 and a bigger top mount. And, then I tuned those on my own car, and now I'm feeling maybe more like this might be something I'd be more comfortable doing for someone else. And then, had a few close friends that were willing to give me a chance, and just kind of knowing that I was going to be super slow and methodical and careful. you tune some cars, you tune some more, and then you realize, well, there's nobody else around doing this. And this guy that flew in from California and they had to drive to Jersey, that didn't work out for whatever reason. Those cars didn't run that great. So, maybe I've got something here. And at the time I was selling insurance, and it was definitely not a dream job. I really appreciated it because I had an awesome boss and mentor there. The company I was working for was totally legit, and I was making good money, but it wasn't something I saw myself doing long term. And ultimately just decided to go for it. Basically sold that car and bought a cheap car as the down payment on a loan to back then that was when everybody could get a loan for anything easily. Kind of why things fell apart years ago, but it was great for me. I walked in there, I'm a kid with like a 1-page business plan, and they were like, yeah, sounds good, here's some money. And so I purchased a dyno and had just enough left over for a few months of operating expenses, and decided that however many hours it took to pay rent was just what was going to happen, and that's how it got going.
That's wild. I can't believe they're just like, here's the plan. Here you go.
Yeah,
it was a different time then, though.
Yeah, for sure. If I remember correctly, the business plan was like, this is what the dyno costs. This is what I'm going to charge per hour, and I think I can do this many hours a week. And they were like, yep, seems legit.
Did you focus on a particular model or brand?
So back then, the really popular cars, at least in the import world, which is kind of what I had fallen into, were the Subarus, DSMs. The Evo came out shortly after, so it started to be Evos too, and then tons of Hondas. So basically started with what was around, and that's what it was. And I think this has come up a number of times over the years, but I think part of the reason that I was as successful in not blowing things up early on was just kind of being really, really careful, knowing that, the Subaru engine I have is not going to put up with a lot of abuse, and I'm going to have to do it pretty well. So when it came to tune like a DSM or a Honda, I kind of took that same approach as if it was fragile, even though it wasn't. And that kind of kept me out of trouble. I'm sure it also kept me from making as much power as I possibly could have back then. But at that time, it was far more important to me that I not break anybody's car.
So that's actually like one of those things that a good tuner will learn early. It's like the play here is to not blow things up, not do it on big horsepower. So that first shop you opened, that was innovative, right?
Yeah, so innovative tuning. This was, I think I made it official May 2004. That's when I had like a physical location. It was tiny. It was 1,200 square feet. It was basically, the office was like a shed that was meant to be like a shelter for workers working outside that my father-in-law sheetrocked for me, and we shoved it inside this open garage space. And then the dyno just sat there on the floor. It was a dyno dynamic, so I could roll it inside or outside. Like on a warm day, we would dyno cars outside, which was cool. Kind of missed that. But yeah, there wasn't much. It was just me. Then I had one helper who had come in for a little bit, and then fortunately things went really well and accelerated very quickly. And in a year and a half, I was in a 6,500 square foot place and kind of broadened things out, had staff doing service work, and I was basically the tuner at that point.
And that was it.
And that was it. Just kind of kept going from there. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You ended up. So I mean, that's about the time I started seeing you. You later on ended up doing a bunch of work for Cobb. Did you actually officially work for Cobb, or were you just like a consultant? Like what? I guess maybe I've never understood exactly your relationship with Cobb, but I know you have a lot to do with what was going on over there for a few different things.
Sure. Yeah. So, right around 2015, I started doing contract work for them remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like a 1 year progression as I kind of wound things down at my business and then moved to Austin to work at Cobb full time. So 2016 to 2022, those 6 years, I was full time employed at Cobb. Part of the deal I had with them was that I would still keep up with, some of my customers and do some side tuning effectively. I was still tuning cars and doing things on the side, but yeah, I mean, full time for Cobb, as their calibrator handling all of the Japanese vehicle platforms for that chunk of time. And then also kind of helping out with like BMW and some of the other platforms there as well. So yeah, put that time in with Cobb, and then decided to basically switch to doing contract work. So I still do work for Cobb, but now I'm kind of more open and available. So I also do work for High Performance Academy, and I'm going to be delivering a auto tranny tuning course that I'm going to New Zealand to film in about a month or two. And then
That's sick.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. They're super awesome crew of people. Their content is fantastic. I wish it was available when I started tuning, but super glad that it's out there for everyone now. I think it's definitely helped the industry in general, like up its game, just with all that information available.
If anything, it's made the consumer significantly more intelligent. At least those who find that. I wish we could force feed social media with a lot of the stuff they make, because that's all. It's all really solid content. I can't say I've ever watched anything of theirs that I went, yeah, they don't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, Andre's the real deal. He was in a similar situation, running a performance shop like I was for years. They were very good at what they did. He still is, clearly. So yeah, I mean, everyone there is absolutely the real deal. So definitely a pleasure to work with them. And then, other than that, I have some shops that I'm kind of the third-party tuner for. And then I have a few rates teams I work with, and then my personal customers. So. And then in addition to that, I do some emissions compliance stuff for a few companies that manufacture parts and are looking to.
You guys are helping us right now. We're trying to get the AOS. We currently, so it's kind of a goofy situation, but our air oil separator that we make here at IAG, we also make for Cobb Tuning, and the Cobb went through and did the carb certification stuff with all of that, and that's why. Technically, their AOS is the only one that currently is legal for use in California due to having a carb certification. And you're helping us, even though it's the same thing, it's a different product. We had to change some stuff over, and you're helping us get that through. So you're doing a bunch of product development also. So you get your fingers in everything, man.
I do, yeah. And then I also do a bit of project management for some bigger vehicle projects. Like there's a diesel swapped Nissan GTR that runs at Pikes Peak, and
that's cool.
For that project, basically determined these are all the changes we're going to try to make to the car for this year. Working on dry sump setup, so things well outside of electronics. But then also designing all of the new electronics. Like that car is going to have 3 PDMs for this year that I set up, along with, Motec central dash logger and all sorts of other electronics to gather tons of data, because the owner of that vehicle actually is a performance part manufacturer for diesel motors. So he's looking to, basically get as much data out of this project as he can. So, sometimes I'll end up just kind of being brought in to kind of be the general engineer on the project. And then, for example, on the Life GTR that we went to Australia for World Time Attack with, on that one,
what's that experience like?
Oh man, it was super cool. I was so glad.
You've done a lot of North
Adam.
American Time Attack with pretty much every sanctioning body. You did a bunch in Canada. You've done global. You've done a little bit of Grid Life. So you've seen it all, and in any variation, how crazy is World Time Attack? Because we may be trying to make a swing at that for 2025. We have some offers on the table of maybe trying to get over there, and it'd be nice to have somebody to talk to that's done it.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
right.
I hope that works out for you, man. It's a heck of an experience. I think it's the whole vibe of it is kind of like I don't know how to put it, honestly. So Grid Life is basically the biggest festival atmosphere time attack event in the US. And then it's kind of like if you took that and multiplied it by 10.
Wow.
There's just a lot going on. There's a huge number of people. And they also have other events going on alongside it. So they have drifting, they have roll racing, they have like a Red Bull air show. I mean, it just kind of, it's overwhelming. I'm there kind of working on the car most of the time, but every time I poke my head out of the garage, there's something super cool going on. It's just nonstop. They definitely know how to put on a show over there. And so many people turn out for it. There's just this fantastic car culture over there, and they're super into it.
That's I think the big difference is from looking at what they're doing, their average consumer, their average attendee has a lot more of an idea of what's going on track. That's one of the downsides with Grid Life, unfortunately, is they're kind of using music as the honey to attract the bears. And but you can tell that there's a lot of people who really have no idea what's going on track, and some of that is just how it's presented, and they're trying everything they can to fix that. They're doing a better and better job, but like Adam in the chat just said, Gingerman is a perfect example. There were 30,000 people there last year. It was crazy. But your average attendee, I would say 80% of them are really more there for the music. The music and the party, which is great, and I don't want to take anything away from that. It's a lot of them don't. It's not that they don't like cars. They're there. They know this is a car event, but they really don't understand the difference of what's going on. Like, drifting is obviously easy to see. It's drifting, and I'm really happy that HPD is no longer a part of it, because HPD isn't going to put asses in stands. But it's hard to explain what time attack is, or what just happened on track when you're just somebody sitting, out in the stands or out in the grass or whatever, and watching what's going on, understand what happened, what the gravity of the situation here. And they've done a very good job of that with World Time Attack. A very good job of that, of you understand what's happening, or why this car came off track, or if a lap is happening, it, like the announcers are making a big deal, they're watching the right cars. They've done a very good job of that, and they're working on that with Grid Life, but it's rough. So
yeah, I mean, I think Grid Life's made amazing progress, and honestly, from where it started, time attack just isn't a huge thing in the US, as much as we'd all feel that it deserves it.
It's getting there.
It's yeah. I mean, there's been awesome progress, and I love that. But in Australia, it's kind of more like if there's a cool car event, people will go, and they've made it exciting. They've provided a little bit of this and that. It's not only time attack, and I think that helps too. Which I think Grid Life's done a great job of with bringing in the drift cars, because whether you're into racing or not, cars smoking tires and making cool noises is pretty universally cool. And then hopefully some of the folks that come there for the music end up seeing something else they like, So I really love what they're doing. And then it kind of was the first thing in the U.S. that felt similar to what they have in Canada, up near Toronto with Canadian Sport Compact Series. So I used to race with them when I was running my old Impreza time attack car, and they put on a great show where they don't have music, but they have car show and drifting, and they happen to do a few of the events at facilities that also have drag strips. So, one way or another, if you're into car stuff, you're going to find something you like. And I think they did really well with that. They had a really, really solid number of folks in the stands. And I think we're starting to see that really pick up in the U.S. And it's really exciting to me because, like I said, people deserve to see it. It deserves to be seen. And I know that Super Lap Battle, Global Time Attack folks, and Grid Life are all working hard to get us there.
Yep. It's getting there, and you're starting to see it with the amount of people that are showing up or the amount of people that recognize what's going on. We live in some exciting times. You know what I mean? What really sucks is I wish some of that money that existed during the like the 2008 to 2010 era of, I guess, where you had like manufacturers throwing money, like Scion was throwing huge amounts of money at Chris Ratto. You know what I mean? I would like to see that amount of effort get put in now that people actually have a concept of what's going on. It would
absolutely.
Be. I think you'd see some amazing stuff.
At the time, I was racing against the Versace sponsored cars that Can Jam was building.
Yep.
And so me and my little shop with my buddies, working on the car, to us, we weren't super thrilled that they had Versace money, but at the end of the day, it's fantastic for the sport. It definitely elevated things quite a bit, and it allowed them to build this amazing car to give us something to aim for. So really that was fantastic, and hopefully we'll see more of that.
Yeah, and I think it's getting there because they're they have the ability to show the amount of people that are showing up to these. It's marketable. It's becoming more and more marketable by the day. But yeah. Let's see. Let's kind of talk about some of your cars. I mean, I know you from a few different wacky GC8s. I'm pretty sure the GC you were the car you were running in the Canadian series is the GC8 that I know more than most. At one point it was bright yellow. I feel like it was white at one point too. I don't know. Yep. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So you were running that for a while. You've had a few pretty crazy rides recently. You have an H6 swap, which you also have a love for that engine. An H6 swapped GC that you were running in the Grid Life touring car championship. So you were doing some wheel-to-wheel racing with that. Let me hear about that old GC, what that whole situation was and what led you down that road.
Sure, yeah. So that car was originally purchased for an event called Winged Warrior, which was a benefit for wounded soldiers. And it was out in Indianapolis, if I remember correctly, that area. And it was just something that we felt we wanted to be a part of, so we decided to build a car for it. And started out by trying to find a Brighton, which would be the base model Impreza 2-door. And basically bought one for $1,200 from a Subaru dealership, which sounds crazy now, but had to drive it home from New Hampshire in a blizzard, and the only thing I told them I cared about was that it had no rust and that it make the drive home. And I literally told them I don't care if it blows up when it gets here, but it needs to make it home. And so they're like, oh yeah, it's fine, and like I'll take it to lunch, make sure it's good. So I show up to the dealer at like 10 or 11 at night on a weekend. They just leave the keys in it for me so I can take it. And basically, if I remember right, like 25 minutes into the drive, the thing just pegs the coolant gauge. And that's how I find out that the head gaskets are blown already.
Oh, no.
And so at this point, I'm just like, this engine's coming out. I just basically stopped at every gas station I could along the way and put, I don't even remember, probably at least 30 gallons worth of bottled water in the thing. I just kept adding it like every 20 minutes. And the thing made it home and was definitely dead when it got home. But that was how I got the car that ended up being Voltron, which is the one that we built for that event and then ended up racing in Time Attack. So kind of a rough start, but I had already built a 91 to 94 Legacy sports sedan.
Nice.
That had the 22T motor in it. And basically, I think at first I was running like an STI turbo, then an FP Green went on it, and then a GT35R with a Ultimate Racing rotated turbo kit. I don't know if those are still available, but
man, I haven't heard that name in a minute either.
Yeah, GT35R kit, and I was running it at like 33 pounds with no intercooler, just running methanol, and took that out of the Legacy, put it into the Impreza, and bolted a couple things on and went to this event. So that's kind of how it started. And at the event, I decided this was going to be the last event on that motor. We were going to try this new crazy thing, the 2.5 STI motor, which was new at the time, and it just wouldn't die. So I'm running the thing at 33 pounds for beating the heck out of it. This event was a combination autocross and drag race, and it was like roasting all four tires and throughout the whole autocross run, just like huge clouds of tire smoke, and it would not die. So we finally ran the manual boost controller down until it stopped and did a drag pass. And I don't know how much boost it made because the sensor for the Autronic standalone that I was using at the time only read so high, and the boost gauge only went to like 35, and it broke the needle off. It was 40 plus something. And we finally found out what it takes to kill a stock EJ22T. They're pretty amazing.
They were beasts in their day. That's for sure. That's I love hearing stories like that. If you were wondering, Ultimate Racing is still selling Subaru like up pipes and stuff. I'll be damned. You got me wondering. My ADHD hit when you said that, and I'm like, I gotta check.
Yeah, I hope they're doing all right. They were one of the early ones that kind of.
Yep.
I don't even know if there were other rotated kits available at the time. That was the one.
I think they're one of the first. I know Turbo Excess and Perrin followed real close after them, but I think they were one of the first. Especially if you're talking 35 hours. So, man, that's crazy. So whatever ended up happening to that car, you went and you ran the crap out of it, and then like that development turned into, I mean, if you were going heads up against the Can Jam cars, I'm assuming you were up in what they would consider their unlimited class. So, I mean, did that thing ever go on a sequential? Did you? I feel like you had an H6 in it at one point too.
I didn't have an H6 in that car. The first H6 I actually did was my sketchy uncle, my new shit box.
Yep.
that I run in GLTC and just kind of for fun and as an R&D car. But the the Voltron car always had 4 cylinders. It had the 22T in it, and then after that, it always just had the STI 2.5 single AVCS in it.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, we definitely ended up doing a bunch of stuff on that car. Tried water to air intercooler. We did doing a rear radiator setup, back to air. All sorts of iterations of different things with that car. One of them had water to air kind of in the passenger footwell with a turbo right there, so that we had like extremely short intercooler piping.
So you stuck the turbo in the
cool.
cabin. This was a conversation I wanted to have. So this is something I've contemplated doing. You ran the exhaust, so the turbo literally was in the cabin with you, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So
how awful was that?
I mean, I had no door windows in the car at the time, so there was a decent amount of airflow, and when you're only out there for one lap, which is all I ever did in that car,
oh god,
it was
Safety
fine.
Mike is typing. Safety Mike's gonna say no.
Yeah,
Don't.
it worked really, really well.
Yeah.
The first year we ran it in the Canadian Sport Compact Series, we set the track record at every track and won the season championship. And they changed the rule book for us for the next year, so that was not going to happen again. But they were kind enough to let us use it. Yeah, it's the best spooling setup I've ever driven on a Subaru. But essentially, if you run the up pipe through the firewall, have the turbo right there, you can pretty much come out of the compressor housing straight into a water intercooler, right back out, and then back through the firewall into a normally oriented intake manifold, and have like 2 feet of charge piping instead of the usual 15 feet.
It still had to be crazy hot.
I mean, when I was running it with just a straight pipe exhaust that was coming out the passenger rear quarter, it was pretty good. We did have to run a muffler for one event, and as soon as it had the muffler in it, that was just like a ball of heat, and we were like, all right, this is not going to work.
Oh, so the second you added some like resistance to the exhaust, it tried to kill you.
Yeah, I mean, when the heat was immediately exiting, it was fine. When it was kind of parked in a muffler, a few feet away from you, it was not ideal.
So here's something that I've bounced around a little bit with too, and I kind of would like to hear your take on this. I've heard differing theories on whether an air-water intercooler would work for track use. I could see endurance racing, it probably wouldn't be great because sooner or later you'd soak the whole system, but it sounds like that setup worked really well for you. Do you think that's a viable way of cooling charge temps in like a time attack car?
Yeah, so at the time, we were starting to mess with aero and starting to try to figure that out. And as soon as you're thinking about aero, you start thinking about packaging and where everything's going to go, and not wanting to stack coolers, and trying to close up the front of the car. And water to air seems like this magic thing that just avoids having to put a massive front mount in the car. Of course, the downside, like you said, is you have to keep water cool. And the biggest issue, in my opinion, with water to air, aside from the weight and complexity, is you're trying to keep water down near ambient temperature. And the way heat exchangers work, you basically need a temperature differential across your radiator for it to function. So when you're talking about like regular engine coolant, and it's 70 degrees outside and your coolant's 200 degrees, you have this massive difference in temperature. So it can do tons of cooling. But when it's 70 degrees outside and you're trying to keep your water 70 degrees and it's now 80 or 90, like there just isn't much cooling potential to drag it back down. And water also can basically take a lot of energy before it gets hot. But once it gets hot, it's very hard to cool back down. So when you're running the car for a short period of time, and you've got an ice box full of ice, and you start your run.
That was going to be my next question. I'm assuming you guys were using ice or something. You'd have to try to cool that water well below ambient because you need that differential.
Exactly. So what we would do is, as we're prepping for a run, the guys at the shop that would help me would basically ice the thing down, run the water pump, melt all the ice, and then basically drain just enough water to refill the entire ice box, and probably do that 2 or 3 times if we had the time between sessions. And we could get the water down to like 40 degrees on an 80-degree day before we even went on the track.
Yeah.
And, also have it full of ice. And that was pretty much best case scenario. But the unfortunate part is you got to do an outlap, right? So you're not like immediately going on the track and running down it like you can with a drag car. So, let's say you're running the car for at least a couple minutes just to get ready to do your flyer. And at that point, you've warmed up the water pretty significantly. And by the time you finish a run, the water was usually hot, but acceptably, maybe it was like 120 degrees.
Sure.
But the amount of effort we put into trying to make it go longer than one lap was pretty significant, and we didn't make it happen. So certainly not to say that it couldn't be done. I know a lot more now than I did 10 plus years ago. But it's a massive challenge. It's a lot of complexity. You got a ton of weight of water and just extra stuff. And so far, in my opinion, at this point, is it's not worth it. I absolutely love it for drag racing and don't want to go drag racing without it. But for anything that needs to run for more than seconds at a time, it's pretty challenging to keep water cold.
Well, I think that pretty much settled that. And I was looking into it exactly for the reasons you were saying, because once you start playing with aero, you immediately start looking at heat exchangers if you have half a brain. Like, that'll be the very first thing you start looking at right after you start getting some concept of aero. It's like it's on that Dunning-Kruger curve. And
100%.
And the second you look at it like that, an air water intercooler immediately goes, well, I don't want this big silly thing in the front of my, because I'm only going to have so much air coming in the front of this car, and I want to limit that. You're like, air water intercooler, that'll fix this whole thing. It don't fix this whole thing.
Yeah, and not only that, I'm like, well, you're either hanging this huge hunk of aluminum off the absolute front point of the car, which is terrible for balance, or you're putting water to air in the cabin, and that sounds great too. So, I mean, there's multiple reasons it's attractive. And I think if you're running a turbo system that's not generating as much heat as we were, that would certainly help. There are certain things you could do to make it more likely to function. But in the end, I think if I had to say yay or nay, I'd say nay. I'd just go air to air. It's simple, works great. So
you guys won a championship with that car. You had, I mean, that's what I remember it from. You won a championship with that car. You did a bunch of crazy stuff, and then I'm assuming somewhere in that ballpark, Can Jam showed up, and it became borderline impossible to run against those guys. Is that kind of where you were like, I want to play with some other stuff? Like, what happened?
Sure, yeah. So the series was actually run by Can Jam staff. Canadian Sport Compact Series was run by their shop. So they definitely, they were doing the tech. They were racing the car against me, which made that first season a bit tricky and and interesting. And it was pretty easy for me at the time to say, well, man, they just changed this rule so that I can't run my car like this anymore. Ultimately, in the end, it was a safety thing. You probably shouldn't have the turbo in the car, in the cabin. But anyway, they're really good guys, and I think once they realized that some competition was good for the sport, rather than them just showing up and kicking everyone's butt all the time,
Yeah.
We got along great. And the second season I ran, there was like big smiles from them when well and back and forth, and we had a great time. So they actually did race their car against me. The first year I won every race. The second year it kind of depended what the track was like. So
Yeah.
the Button Willow of Canada is Toronto Motorsports Park. And at that track, it has a couple long straights. And my car at the time was, I didn't even need to really turn it up that much. It was just faster in a straight line than their car. And their car handled much better. Their car had legit aero that I did not have.
This sounds a lot like my car now.
Yeah, so when we would go to Mossport, for example, we ran at their driver development track, which was basically like for F2000s and for driver training. So it was super technical. I couldn't really make use of the power, and their car absolutely outhandled mine. And frankly, it was also, they also had a better driver in their car. They have a pro driver. We call him Ricky Bobby, affectionately. Phenomenal guy. And at that track, I didn't have a chance. I mean, I went for it, but they would beat me there. I would beat them on the other track. And we had a great back and forth that second season, which I loved. But ultimately, when you're, battling with a car of that level and trying to beat it, you end up spending probably more time and money on your project than you probably should or want to. And
ooh, man, I know all about that too.
Yeah. So between that and ultimately what was the Achilles heel of the car was not the engine at all. We never had any engine problems. Was the drivetrain. So we were working really hard with Drive Shaft Shop at the time to come up with axles that could handle something like this. And their pro level axle setup with the Porsche CVs that can articulate was basically from me going out and breaking a rear axle on the first lap like 6 times in a row with their stage 5s.
Good God. It was that brutal. Was that at that point you were running a sequential, were you not?
No, stock tranny.
Oh my God.
How were you breaking axles that bad?
Wheel hop or something?
No wheel hop at all, but 305 slicks. And the car hooked up really well. And coming out of low speed corners, it was, the acceleration was pretty violent. There was just some specific corners where I could load the car up in a way that the axle would need to articulate in a manner that the CV would just shear immediately. So at first, we were breaking bars, in fourth gear or whatever, just on power. And then they kept making them bigger and bigger in 300M material. And then those stopped breaking. And then it was the CVs. And as soon as they switched to those Porsche like 930 style ones that lots of folks use for off-road because they can articulate really well, we basically weren't maxing the CV out anymore. And ultimately that was what was causing the problem. We were running the car relatively low, so axle angles weren't normal. But once they came out with that, everything was good. And then all of a sudden it was like every 1 to 2 events, fourth gear in the tranny would disappear in the middle of the gear. That's just kind of how it is on a Subaru road race car. If you make enough torque and have enough grip, your fourth gear is on borrowed time. And eventually, I was working with the guys at Rally Spec back then. They were always happy to help me out and on rebuilds, getting them back in a timely manner. But eventually it was like, it's really rough to show up to an event knowing there's a good chance I won't even get to the time attack session at the end of the day. Because the way CSCS worked, and it's a bit unique compared to other stuff I've been to, you practice in the morning, you got 2 runs, you got 2 qualifying runs, and then in the afternoon they had what was called the time attack session. And each car got 3 laps. They were the only 3 laps that mattered all day for your standing. And like you had to be on it for those 3 laps. So if your car breaks earlier in the day, you had a great time, doesn't matter, doesn't count. So it made it really exciting for fans. Sometimes it was tough when you're racing and your car lost a tranny in the middle of the day, but ultimately made like this crescendo at the end of the day that was everybody was super hyped. They always had an MC on the mic hyping everybody up, and like that part of it was super cool. So something a little different they did up there. But yeah, I mean, the trannies would break fourth gear, never any other gear. Knowing what I know now, it makes sense. I did try getting a used sequential box back then, thinking, maybe make the investment and it'll just work. And turned out I bought a box that was used from a shop that said it was good, and one of the gears didn't work immediately, just on the lift.
Man.
It turned out to be a bad purchase, but there really wasn't a super strong option available back then that wasn't like just ridiculously expensive.
You start looking into like a Modena or something.
I think that was like the only one I can think of back then that could really hold some power. The one I had got back then was a Caps, which was lighter than stock, and that sounded cool until it didn't work great. But nowadays I have an X-Shift Plus, which is their high torque model, and I have that in the GLTC car simply because I got it for Voltron, and that car is not together right now, so I might as well use it. And man, I never worry about that thing ever, not because that car doesn't make any power, but because I've seen what they hold up to in my customer cars, in time attack cars and rally cars. I don't know that any of my customers have ever rebuilt one. They're just super strong.
That's super exciting, because that's actually one of the ones that I was going to be looking into. So I don't know if you've seen Grid Life's quote unquote festival format now. But that's essentially how the festival format works, is how that used to work with the so any of the big festival events. It's you have practice, qualifying, and then they take the top 5 from qualifying for each class, and they get 2 laps, and that's they take the fastest of those 2, and that's the only one that counts. And
that's really exciting, man. Yeah, like I said, I think for fans, it was great.
And that's what they did, is they made something super digestible for the fans, and it is intense to race that format. It kind of, one of the nice things is it's still time attack, and we didn't want to take that away. So like the record counts for any time during the weekend. Like the record is the record, but as far as placement, for the event in particular, that is done in the at least the festival events. That's done at the like that. So anything that's live cast is like that. It's super intense. It's a total riot, and it is butt puckering, to say the least. It worked out really good for us at Grid Life Midwest this year, where we qualified 3rd or 4th. Like we barely got into the show, and we ended up winning the thing. It just got so hot out that everybody else's cars went to shit, and we finally were able to put in a lap that made some sense. And then it burned us really hard when we were in Cali, when we had kind of a catastrophic failure, even though we were way ahead of everybody. But still, I love that format. So one of the things, I'm super stoked you said that about X-Shift. I don't know if you follow the crazy rule set of Street Mod. One of these days we can talk about this, but I'm sure you've seen the ProDrive P25, that like kind of resto mod 22B or WRC style thing that they made, and they're using an X-Shift, a variation of an X-Shift transmission. It's like a helical gear that's sequential, and technically that is a production vehicle now, therefore it would be legal for me to use that within class. So I have I'm eyeballing one of those, so we'll have to talk about that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, hey, got to use the rules if you're trying to win, right?
Hey, if you aren't racing the rule book, you are not racing. That's
absolutely
that is how it works. So you did a bunch of time attack, had a good time with that. you've worked on all sorts of other stuff. I mean, you've done a bunch of GTR stuff. What's some of your favorite cars that you've put together? Like, do you got a particular favorite that you're just you're strangely attracted to of your cars, whether it's a Subaru or not?
Sure, yeah. I think there are always those cars over the year that stick with you. For me, I think about some of the cars I've had and then sold, and which ones I still had. And then there's definitely been a ton of cool customer projects along the way. So it's tough to pick one, but I think getting to go to World Time Attack with the Life GTR and setting a lap time that was the fastest North American team time ever, for any class was really exciting. And just kind of being able to work with their team and get that car from where we started to where it is now has been really rewarding. So I think for me that would be one of the big ones.
I mean, that's huge. That is, and that car is insane. That whole project, that whole team over there, like that's got to be up there. So okay. Now let's flip this. Do you got any that stick out in your mind as some of the worst things you've been involved in? That you're just like,
Sure.
Everything was wrong with this, whether it's just the car or like just a situation or whatever.
I would say most Hondas that came in for tuning.
Yeah.
Which is why I rarely do them anymore. But okay, I'll give you one example because I'll never forget this. So. And I'll preface by saying the runner-up to this was someone who showed up with PVC intercooler piping. They did not make the cut for
Wait, there was a runner-up to...
Yes, the PVC piping was only the runner-up.
That's amazing. Okay.
That car actually ran and got tuned, and it did end up blowing a pipe off, but they came back with proper piping, and that was fine. I think that the PVC pipe held up until like 6 pounds of boost, and we were taking bets, and that I think everybody lost. Everybody thought it would be less than that, but they had used a lot of sealant apparently. So that's the runner-up. The winner, and it's just one little thing about the car, but it's just too funny to me. So they hadn't quite finished their intercooler piping. They were fabricating it themselves, and the part they hadn't finished was the connection between two of the cold side pipes. And there was basically a section where the piece of pipe they were using was a little short, and there was a gap of about 2 inches between where the coupler on one pipe ended and the next pipe in the chain started. And they brought it in and they told me about it. They were like, hey, just want to let you know, like, I must have got, a piece of pipe that was a little short. It's not quite perfect, but I think this will be fine for today. Let's just tune it. And then, I'll just fix it when I get home. Yeah. And I was like thinking like, surely what he's describing is not what's actually happening. Let me just look, let's pop the hood. He'll show me. And he was like, yeah, so like, see how close the pipes are? Like, how fast the turbo's spinning, the air's moving really fast.
Oh, no.
Like, it's just, I know some of it'll get out, but pretty much all of it's going to jump the gap and, just go into the next pipe and get in the motor.
It's just going to jump the gap.
And he was dead serious. And like, I don't know, I'll just never forget it. But that car did not go on the dyno. Sadly,
you don't say.
We had to break their heart and let them know that was not going to work. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Wow. Yeah, that's solid, man. Oh man. So you're doing a bunch of stuff with HP Academy now, which is super cool. So what all are you doing with them? Are you doing like kind of like tuning seminar stuff? What's going on with that?
Yeah, I think the first thing we ended up doing, which was kind of like a trial run, was they needed a worked example for tuning a Gen 5 LS motor setup. and those cars aren't super readily available to them. So they set it up with me to do it, and went well. And then they decided to have me write an automatic tranny tuning course, which is now written, and I'm going to go film. And then after that, we're going to do another course. In the meantime, I help them out doing support on their forum. So basically, when you get courses or become a gold member with HPA, you get access to their forum. And unlike most forums where there's a whole lot of misinformation, or maybe people who aren't being super helpful, maybe just being a bit critical, it's literally only people who are there to learn and help each other out. So it's really refreshing and awesome. I'm on there to basically just kind of try and make sure that everybody's questions get answered.
That's super cool. That it's really awesome to have resources like that out there. Like I said, I wish we could force feed that to some of the rest of social media.
There's a long tail of misinformation out there. Stuff that was disproven 10 years ago still floats around.
Longer than that, even.
A lot of information's definitely been lost as people have gotten away from the forums, which tough to see. Of course there was misinformation on the forums as well, but there were threads that got sticky. There were certain ones where you knew, like, this was really valuable info. And now, if you're in a Facebook group, which I do frequent, and you see people trying to help each other out, but there's only so much time someone who really has the knowledge is going to spend to answer the same question every 5 hours when it gets re-asked, because nobody can really find it easily. And then the rest of it is just folks who have a minute, to try and answer, maybe don't have the best answer.
You're pretty nice.
Yeah, it's not as good as a resource as the forums were. It's certainly good in many other ways, but for tech info, I find it's definitely not ideal.
Well, you also, it's hard to vet who's giving you that info these days. Like, it's one thing if somebody gives you some information, then you go look at their wall and you're like, okay, these guys work for this, or their background's that, but you got a lot of people who are just people spewing a lot of things that sound like they know what they're talking about, and really they're the guy who couldn't connect his intercooler piping and thought it just jumped the gap. So you run into that a lot, and it's misinformation stacking on misinformation, and it's hard. At least with Nasiak, you could at least see, this guy's got a really high post count or something. He's been around a long time, and he hasn't been ran out. So I'm pretty sure this dude knows what he's talking about to some degree. You know what I mean? At least you could kind of look at somebody's username and figure it out. But
yeah, and I think one of the big indications of just info being lost is sometimes now people are asking, like, hey, I've got this new idea for this thing that nobody's ever done. Do you think it'll work? And it's like, no, we did that 15 years ago. Here's how it went. Just because it's just so much harder to find it now, and they just don't know. I mean, a lot of the cool stuff I did a while ago has been long forgotten, and we were the first ones to run a 10 on a stock turbo in a Subaru, and the first to run a 9 in a stock short block. And back then it was literally the Evo guys just talk shit on Subarus all day long, so they can't do these things that you can do with an Evo, so I guess we'll just do it quick. And then you talk about it now, hey, wonder if you could run a 10 on a stock turbo, and it's like, yes, this has occurred.
Yep, already happened. What's really crazy now is somebody will do something that somebody did 10 years ago or longer, you know what I mean, ago, and somebody will do it, and the internet will go nuts. Social will go crazy. These people will be put on this insane pedestal when this has all been done. And
it's still cool. It's more.
It's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it to be like we did it first. There's plenty of other people who did things before us, but just it was just like a perfect example of how much knowledge has disappeared, like things that people don't even realize have happened. So that part's unfortunate. And I do try to think of ways, to get that info out there in a way that it's more accessible to people. So I like what HPA is doing. That's why I like doing stuff with them. And, I probably should try to get back to doing more like blog type posts, things that might be searchable later, because I have a boost creep blog post I wrote forever ago that if you type boost creep in on Google, like it randomly will pop up, because I guess people are still reading it. But I probably should be doing more of that too to help out more.
I'm about to have to redo my rant on DCCD. I've put it in every format that I've been dealing with, and I'm going to have to redo it again because the amount of misinformation with DCCD is appalling.
Posted this week, even.
Yeah, this week, by a prominent YouTube channel that likes to blow Subarus up and spread a bunch of misinformation. So yeah, that'll be fun. That might be next week.
There you go.
See. And yeah, I don't know. I should do the same thing. I should literally just sit down and write a blog, pictures and everything else, and do it that way. So it's right. You're right. Like that's honestly, and then it can be searchable, but it's got to be outside of social media, and it's tough. It's hard to be. I feel like it's really hard to be new like be a newer enthusiast these days, just because you're getting blasted from so many different directions, and there's a lot of noise. The one thing, don't get me wrong, Nastiak was noisy, but you could go send somebody to Unabomber's Manifesto and it would get them in the ballpark. You know what I mean? And like now, it's some of the basic things people are asking are astounding. And the Dunning-Kruger curve is they're not getting over the peak of Mount Stupid.
Sure, yeah. So I do try to think like, what is the best avenue for us to help those folks? And I don't know. I feel like a blog post that you hope people will just link to and then paste into that Facebook group when the question comes up, but I'm not sure what the best answer is. But I'd love to see better options for people to get that info. Yeah,
and I don't know. Maybe it's up to some of us who've been around a long time to maybe brainstorm and come up with something. I was really hopeful that maybe Moto IQ would turn into that, and this is nothing against I love Mike to pieces. It just it didn't catch kind of the way I hoped it would, like JJ's saying he's screaming, bring back the forums, and we'd all love the forums to come back. But if you tell somebody, I've sent people links to like Nastiak posts, a really good thread on Nastiak that maybe they should read on a particular topic to kind of catch them up. And a lot of younger kids have absolutely no idea how to even use it.
I think the closest we have nowadays in the modern world is probably Reddit, because that's at least searchable from Google and it'll live a long time and you can make these big posts. But it's not it's not as good as forums, but it's close.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. The searchability of Facebook, I think, is the biggest downfall. If the search functions worked great, then we probably wouldn't be having this issue so much. But the search is pretty awful.
And I don't want this to turn into a giant social media rant, but I think that actually could be fixed by Facebook groups being able to separate inside of the group by sections, and then they could sticky things, like literally give it some forum functions. If you were able to do that, those groups would grow massively, and you could find good info, and pictures would stay forever, and it'd be searched. Give it a search function. I want to search within this group. I feel like that wouldn't be that hard for them to do, but then again, I don't write that, so what the hell do I know?
Yeah, me neither.
So, yeah. So, man, we've ripped through a little bit. We're taking questions from out in the chat too. If anybody's got anything they want to ask or comment, please drop something. I'm gonna do one. What do you got?
Right off the bat. So, Mike, tuning cars is a puzzle, and I'm sure you've got some horror stories. Could you tell me about a really complicated puzzle that took forever to solve? That's part one.
Hey, man, I love it. That's a good one. Really good question.
This is why we have warranty around.
Yeah, so I guarantee what's going to happen here is whatever I think of, I'll think of a much better example as soon as we're done. But, man, I think that the gist of a few of them over the years that have been interesting often comes down to things that people don't know were done to their car before they bought it. And there'll be some unknown factor and something going on with the car. And, we basically have a rundown of everything the customer thinks is done to it. And at the end of the day, it's this thing we didn't even know that was there. But in terms of diagnosis, most of what I find is your general run-of-the-mill intake leak, exhaust leak, battery terminals aren't tight, grounds are loose or corroded. We get a lot of the same stuff over and over and over. But I think one of the huge benefits of doing this for so long is you get to a point where you know exactly how the car is going to behave with a certain set of parts on it unless something is wrong or there's something in the equation that you weren't told is there. And I think that's one of the biggest things that helps in tuning over time. I mean, obviously your knowledge of tuning grows, but this kind of library of knowledge of diagnosing and helping people fix their cars, and just being able to get to a point where you can say, it's this car, it has this behavior, it has these parts that we do know about, it's going to be one of these three things causing it, and this is the first one's the most likely, down the list from there. If you run through those three and it's not there, we'll keep going. Man, I can't think of a fantastic example off the top of my head. Maybe one will pop in my head in a bit.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, I got a part two to the question, which is some people place a lot of faith in what a tune can do. Have you ever had a person say, you tuned my car, my dog died, and it's the tune's fault, and you need to get me a new dog? Seriously,
pretty much, yes.
We've had a lot of those come through. What Graham tells us all the time. It's unreal.
Yeah, no, it definitely happens. I'll give you an example. Very recent. Unfortunately, had a situation where I tuned a car. It was right before a stage rally event, and car made it through 5 stages running perfectly. 5th stage started not running well after, I guess it was Snowdrift Rally. It had been warm then cold. There were 10-inch ruts of mud that had frozen, and the exhaust slammed the ground. And when you have an exhaust leak, you start getting fresh air mixing in with what's actually burning and coming out of the engine. So your O2 reading starts to look lean because you're mixing what actually happened with some fresh air that has more oxygen in it. And the situation was effectively, well, do you think the car was running badly because it was so lean and the car didn't have enough fuel? And it's like, well, the engine didn't, suddenly start running lean. Your fuel pressure didn't change. The tune didn't change. You suddenly started basically fresh air injecting your system. And then ultimately found there was a hairline crack in an up pipe, after hours and hours and hours of them searching for this leak that I was assuring them existed. So yeah, I mean, maybe that falls under the category of a tricky one to find just because of where it was. But yeah, I mean, that's an example of the effect and the cause not being aligned the way the customer thinks they are, but you definitely get far more extreme ones like, I got my windows tinted and now the car doesn't make full boost, or, I know you tuned the car 3 years ago, but today it suddenly started doing this thing. Do you think the tune's messed up and needs fixed?
Oh, I love the miraculous degrading tune.
Yeah. So, just having that conversation to help people understand that, the tune is a thing that cannot really change per se on its own. There are certain parameters that the ECU can move around a little bit depending on what the system is and whatnot. But, just helping them understand that if the vehicle's operation suddenly changes, it's due to something that changed, not the thing that didn't change.
Your tune blew out my taillights. We had
anybody listening thinking this isn't real. It's real.
It's real. And it's not just tunes. The literally the day I started, who is now the guy who is now our sales manager, Pat, was dealing with a guy over the phone. I heard this whole conversation. This was literally my first day at IAG, and it's kind of rare that I'm in the office, but I was there, and this guy was tearing his ass over the phone about how our block was creating stray electricity and like frying a bunch of his electronics. He was blaming it on our block. It was insanity. It's insanity. It is what it is. So, all right. JJ's actually got a great question that this could turn into a hell of a topic. What's your thoughts on like ICE engines, internal combustion engines, going away by, say, 2040 if the government agencies keep kind of pushing the agenda that they're pushing? What are your thoughts on, like, basically just internal combustion engines going away in general? I got my own theories on this, but I'm really interested, since you work a lot closer with a lot of this than the rest of us. I'd like to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'm optimistic. I'll say that first. I don't think they're going away as soon as some folks are trying to make happen. And I think part of that is the government has placed some really strict regulations on ICE engines and basically force them to hit certain emissions targets, which are pretty astounding. And every step of the way, the OEMs have been able to do it. And I mean, just looking at them and how clean these engines are now, I almost look at it and can't believe that it's possible. I mean, I've been in the lab looking at the data, and the air coming out of the car is cleaner than the air going into the car. And, sure, there's certain operating conditions where that's not always the case. But if you have a properly maintained, relatively new vehicle right now, and it's warmed up and you're driving around, you are literally cleaning the air around the car. So it's pretty astounding what they've been able to do in terms of emissions. I think the efficiency we're getting now is pretty incredible, with direct injection and higher compression ratios. Fuel economy, is better than it's ever been. So I think what the engines are doing is really impressive. And as long as we continue to show that the emissions are really impressive, I think we'll be in a pretty good position when they realize we can't actually electrify the entire fleet of vehicles on the road because of various infrastructure issues and limitations in terms of power grid and time to charge. People who don't have their own home don't have the option of just pulling it into the garage and plugging it in every night. I've rented an EV because I wanted to see what the experience was like, and I was on a job in LA, and I'm thinking, LA is kind of the epicenter of this in the US. There's chargers more available than most places. And, there I was in a shop, the back alley of a shopping mall at 10 o'clock at night, sitting there for 40 minutes just so that I could get back to the hotel. And to me, that's just not how I want to live. And I think for a lot of people who don't necessarily fit the mold of the ideal candidate for an EV driver, I think there's going to be more pushback. I love seeing Toyota's kind of, really taken a stand and gone against the grain and said that we don't think full EV is necessarily the way to be going right now. I think hybrid is a phenomenal idea. I think they've claimed that, I believe, they can, I think they want to say it was like they can reduce emissions maybe 50 or 60 times more with a fleet of hybrid vehicles than an EV. So I might be slightly off on the factor there, but in terms of emissions, yeah, I mean, hybrid vehicles have phenomenal potential. I think they're kind of the best of both worlds right now for folks who aren't only short trip driving, can't plug the car in at their home. And I think hybrid just makes a ton of sense to me.
I'm 100% with you there. I believe there's I think EV works very well for a particular group of people, and if it does, it's phenomenal, and that's great for you. And I think that should be an option. I personally love the fact that manufacturers are looking into improving that experience, and I that's great. But I don't see internal combustion engines going anywhere anytime soon. The infrastructure is set up in a particular way to where we're gonna be with this at least another 50 to 100 years, I think. With that stated,
I got another one.
Sure.
So you're a tuner, Mike, and you've been involved in some really wicked tip of the spear type projects. Do you see something coming down the line for turning a regular ICE car, such as a BRZ, into a hybrid? So introducing motors and a battery pack as like a tuner package?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the SEMA show, especially, that's something that I've been really taking a close look at the past few years, because that's one of the shows that I go to where that's being demonstrated. And there are a lot more companies now going down that road of not only full EV conversion, but auxiliary systems. So I know, for example, it was either at SEMA or PRI over the winter. I know Tremec offered a transmission replacement, which basically was the form factor of a regular manual transmission, and you just bolted it in, and suddenly you had a hybrid system. And
that's cool.
Yeah,
I mean, that would work for a lot of things.
Absolutely,
really
yeah.
Cool setup.
And who wouldn't want to take their old Mustang and have a bit of extra power and this cool new thing? So,
totally.
Yeah, I love it. I actually did a little bit of work for a company called Hypercraft this week. They're working on the power units in the new electric Sierra cars. And, I mean, they're doing some cool stuff in terms of, like a serious performance race vehicle that's affordable. So I love seeing that, because I know a lot of the cool performance EV street vehicles are just super expensive, but then they've kind of come in with something, that costs kind of like what a really badass side-by-side with an ICE motor would cost. So I'm definitely seeing some really cool options coming. And I think in terms of a hybrid add-on, the units that fit in place of or in line with the transmission make a lot of sense to me. I think doing away with the starter, there's just some cool things you can do with that that kind of limit the extra expense involved and allow for a relatively reasonable installation. And then in terms of electric motor control, they're so much more simple than an ICE engine. I mean, I look at what a modern control strategy looks like to make these new ICE engines meet emission standards with variable cam and all the stuff they have going on. And then an ICE motor is kind of just like, how much do you want? Okay, I can do that. And it's just wiring them up and controlling them is very simple. So adding it onto an existing project is something I think we'll see a lot more of in the future. and definitely something I've thought about for Time Attack, but I'm kind of curious where the rules are going to end up on that, and who's allowing it, how much. But something I think we'll be seeing more of in racing too.
350Z that's been doing pretty good with a hybrid setup, of really strung out VQ, and then that thing's nuts.
It's got tire temperature sensors and everything. He's got a lot of cool tech in that car.
Yeah, and that car is very fast. I mean, he's a really good driver too, but that car's legit. So where do you see the Subaru community going? A lot's changed in the past, let's say, 3-4 years. One of the things that has really, I don't think caught me by surprise, but I think has caught a lot of other people by surprise, is you have a lot of millennial aged folks who, their dream car was to buy an STI, and the price of GDs have skyrocketed.
STIs are gone.
And they don't make an STI anymore. And I have my own theories about where things are going. But I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are as far as where you see the community going. The new 22 WRX is pretty sweet. I love the new BRZ, but that's kind of where we're at as far as enthusiast cars from that side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was definitely scary to hear the STI was going away. But I think when the prior gen WRX came out, the 2015 to 21 version, I think it brought in a ton of new customers who, weren't going to be Subaru folks otherwise. But then suddenly Subaru had this kind of bit more refined car that actually got decent gas mileage and was fun and cool. And I think they've definitely taken that up a notch with the 22 WRX with a bit better motor. So I think as far as the WRX goes, there's no question in my mind this is a really phenomenal car for the money. And realistically, when the STI started to get up around like near 50 grand to get a new one that's optioned out, it became expensive enough that I think it just didn't compete with the other cars in that price range. So I totally agree with them doing away with it. To be honest, I flame suit on, but I don't think the car made sense anymore. Had they finally put a more modern engine in it, put a DCT in it, done something to make it competitive with cars in that price range, I would have loved to see that. But I think they were kind of done with the big development, and they just decided to give us a WRX that's kind of halfway between what a WRX was and what an STI was. And I love it. I mean, the new electronic wastegate setup, while not ideal for going big, makes the car as it's delivered with some bolt-ons or a tune or whatever just absolutely phenomenal. So I love the WRX of today. I imagine Subaru will keep it around for about 5 years like they usually do. I am scared to see what happens after that. I imagine sales will pretty much determine what happens next, but I'm glad they've refined the car a bit. I think they've broadened the audience. They've kept the price point reasonable. So diehard Subaru people are buying it. People who, maybe would have bought something from another brand. A lot of those cars have gone away now, and the WRX is now in a space where it has fewer similar competitors, I think, which will help it out.
Especially for manual transmissions.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. What else are you going to buy outside of a GR Corolla right now? And I really think you really touched the a key there, which was the STI, as far as its price point, was competing against stuff that it just really wasn't fair for an STI to fight with. And at one point it might have made sense if you had like an Evo or something else to fight with. So like you would cross shop that. But at that point you were cross shopping an STI with like a hot BMW or something. And it's they're not really comparable cars unless you lived in like a northern climate, where you dealt with snow and you absolutely had to have a large back seat for your kid. Like, it started narrowing down who is this car actually for. But I mean, you can buy low level Caymans, things like that. You really start like when you're talking 50 plus grand, it changes what you're looking at as far as cars. I think you're right. Yeah, I really, it probably wasn't the worst idea unless they were going to make a massive update. And I don't think they really even, what war are they fighting anymore? You know what I mean?
Right.
So
no, this is a good take.
I think, I mean,
maybe
if they added enough power to make it competitive, I think, then the tranny starts breaking. It's just like a whole cascading thing. It would have been a whole different car. And at the end of the day, the sales figures kind of spoke. People just didn't buy the car. So, or certainly not enough of them. While the WRX was selling phenomenally and continues to. So, I think they went with, eventually people speak with their dollars and they're producing what people are wanting to buy.
If it makes dollars, it makes sense. That's how it works.
It's just it's an image problem. The STI is now gone. There's no Halo car. Subaru is less cool for it. The only people keeping Subaru cool are the ultra enthusiasts and like the big companies like IAG, for example. The fact that you can go out and get a 1,000 horsepower motor. That's cool. I
agree with that, but I would say new Subaru, and I think the aftermarket's going to be there. It's getting there. We're about to be releasing built engines for the FA24 and all that, and we're going to really start to be able to see where these things can go. I think what you're going to see in the future is the FA24 is a ridiculously good engine for what it is. I'm going to be excited to see people doing an FA24 swap in a GC. I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm excited to see the enthusiast community do some interesting stuff with the newer product that's out there, maybe messing with some of the older chassis like Resto Mod, things like that. And I don't think you're ever going to get away from like GD chassis Subarus. I really believe that is a kind of the Subaru Fox body in a way. You know what I mean? Where I think we're going into in a direction where that's going to be a timeless vehicle, even though they were butt ugly when they came out. So. Like JJ said, FA24 add port injection, put a real 6-speed on it with a DC, a real 6-speed with it, or a DCT option at 50K. That would have won. That would have been sick. It just add port injection to the current WRX, like add the secondary port injection like they run on the BRZs, and I think that alone would have been enough to really put that over the top. The aftermarket would have went nuts with that. The cool factor that would have been added to just people modifying it. They wouldn't have had to make a fancy version because people would have modified it into a fancy version. That's one thing I think that has always annoyed me with Subarus. I don't think they put enough faith in their aftermarket to help them with marketing.
I think they were very slow to pick up on that, but I do feel like I'm seeing more of it now. I think now there's like some real integration with the big Subaru events and Subaru of America, and it's been a few years of that now, but for a very long time I think Subaru corporate just seemed to be anti-aftermarket and weren't really realizing how many vehicle sales that was driving. And that was actually one of the coolest things that ever happened at my shop was we would have customers who would basically decide, like, a bunch of my buddies have had their cars built at your shop. Like, I want to go with you guys. What car should I buy? And the first time it happened, like, it literally blew my mind that someone was asking me this question and not buying just the car that they wanted. But there is power to that, right? If someone's plan is to buy a car that they're going to modify, and they look at who's in the area, who they're going to work with, what do they specialize in, how are they going to get a good result, they're going to choose that car. And I mean, how many Mustangs have been sold because there's a million Mustang performance shops, right? It's the same kind of thing. And the aftermarket is definitely driving those WRX sales 100%. And I think Subaru does see value in it now. I think they're also, I'm sure, bean counters who are concerned about potential warranty stuff.
I think they're late to the party, though. I really, really do. Man, if they would have jumped on board, like really embracing the aftermarket in like '05, can you imagine what it would look like now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I would love to see Subaru do like a heritage program. There's parts that are starting to get, even for GD chassis cars, that are a pain in the ass to get. Like, let's start seeing the ability to buy like old trim pieces and shit. You know what I mean? Or even get like STI limited seats that are still in stock. You know what I mean? I think a heritage program would do a lot for them. I mean, it's done a lot for like GM, the GM Performance line. Mopar has their own kind of performance line, but the GM Performance, going back to that, or Toyota's got a whole heritage line now too, and so does Mazda with the old RX-7 stuff.
Maybe it's a new division of IAG. I don't know.
I didn't say it, but JJ's in here, and one thing I would really, really like to see us make like a reasonable alternative for trim pieces and things like that for older cars, stuff that's harder to get, and use some of our connections to get some of that stuff done. And it might happen down the road. I think Resto Mod GC8s and GDs and stuff, I think there's a place for that. I really, really do. And like the amount of hype that around that ProDrive P25 is a perfect example of that. Like a huge amount of hype.
I definitely see a Resto Mod Subaru in my future, for sure.
See?
Yeah. No,
We're all talking about it.
I already have like one of two plans of how I would do it. But yeah, no, I mean, I actually have a few old customers who've picked up multiple GDs because they want to, kind of set them aside, and they have plans for these Resto Mod type projects. And it's really exciting to me. I love seeing that.
Yep. And I think it's coming, and it's like going back to what I said earlier. I think especially as we start messing with these FA24s, and if we ever do manage to find a way to get over this hurdle of adding port injection for a reasonable amount, and I think you're going to see Resto Mod FA24s become a thing. I think that would be really cool.
That would be sick.
It would be super sick. Can you imagine an 05 STI that gets 30 miles to the gallon, makes 450 horsepower, and
people would lose their minds?
It'd be sick. It'd be amazing, and I would love to see it. And I hope we're around to see that. You know what I mean? I love everything about that. But
yeah, I think those cars really captured kind of that direct physical interaction with the car that gets lost as it gets nicer. Yes. Sometimes nicer isn't better.
I think it's the balance.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's those cars were, if you have never driven, like if you're new to these and you've never hopped in like an 04 to 07 STI and went and just taken it for a serious rip, you're missing out. Like you really don't understand Subaruing. And I really, a lot of that went away when they lost their competition. Why did they have to try harder? Things like all the cool stuff that made that car fun, DCCD and things like that, variable valve timing, all that crap most of that came from them having to try to fight with their direct competitor, which was Mitsubishi at the time. So, well, either way, this has been a ton of fun, Mike. We got to finish this off though, because we've got one mini game that I love to play with all the old OGs who come on here. And that is, we're going to talk about NASIOC member numbers. I'm going to ask the chat who thinks between Mike and I have the lower NASIOC member number. I'm going to preface this with I was a late joiner to NASIOC because I was around during the iClub NASIOC split, and I hung around on
3 times
iClub.
And he's won 3 times.
Yes. But I am undefeated currently.
Well, for what it's worth, I was in the same boat. I didn't even know what the iClub NASIOC beef was. I just knew that I had been on iClub and I was going to stick with them for a while. And I think kind of did until it seemed to run into the ground, and there was a pretty clear switchover of most of the folks I know.
Every post was just Nasiak links.
Yeah, it was that, and at the time there was like these little regional groups, and everybody stopped posting meets and get-togethers on iClub. They were all on Nasiak, and I was like, all right, I guess, if I want to hang out with my friends, I got to go over there. So I was a late adopter too, so we'll see what the people think.
All right, we're taking votes here real quick. Who thinks between Mike and I, who has the lower Nasiak member number? Let's post your vote here real quick. We'll give you another few seconds, and then we're gonna do the reveal.
I vote Dewey. Past performance is partial indicator of future.
I do fart dust. I've been annoying everybody for a long time. My personal vote is I think Mike's got me beat. Mike is about as OG as they come. I don't know if you guys heard, but the man got one of the original Kart Boys short throw shifters straight from the man himself. So my vote's definitely on Mike. Unabomber, yes, has the lowest one. All right. What is your member number?
All right. So I swear I didn't go back in time and do this to throw everyone off, but I had a personal account.
That's what counts.
Then when I started my business, I wanted to change the name to Innovative Tuning, but they needed me to start a new account. And the personal account had a very common name that immediately was taken by someone else. And when that happens, all of your posts disappear. So,
oh no.
The Innovative Tuning account is number like 67,000, and it started in, I want to say it was May of 2004.
Okay.
The other one was definitely older than that, but I'm going to say you've probably got me.
I'm 37078, and
wow.
I came in with the O2WRX guys. I was with that group, and what ended up bringing me over there is I got that basically right around the time I bought my car, which was an O2WRX. I got in May of 03. So, and that was, yep, there it is. I was farting around on iClub before that. When Sport Compact Car was doing all of their testing on the car, and I was just in love with it. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm ever going to pull this off. And I made some really bad financial decisions. And, well, the story ends with me working for IAG now and getting to talk with guys like
Best
you.
as they say is history. Happily ever after.
Yeah. And I'm just glad to lose this bet because, I don't know, it means I might not be the oldest guy in the room. So, hey, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a bunch of us older folks, again, like I said, I look at you as a one of the mainstay pillars of the community, and I think it's up to us to try to keep this community going and try to steer people in the right way. So I don't know, maybe we can brainstorm a little bit. Maybe some of us old schoolers should get together and maybe start a blog. I think that might be a cool idea. Like, we could work together on a single blog. That might, something that's not affiliated with any like shop or anything else. With just Subaru specific info. I think it'd be a really good idea.
Yeah, one-stop shop would be great. Get a bunch of collaborators.
It's either that or we bomb into Reddit and we take over Reddit.
I think that's the way. Reddit's national. There are very few big name guys on there. A couple people just once a week, long form posts on this is what I do, this is what I'm known for, this is what you need to know. It'll start showing up on Google and people it'll raise your brand, man. It's just
maybe that's the plan. Mike, maybe we got to figure out how to use Reddit. We're old.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is this a situation where forums were a thing, Reddit was a thing, now there's something else that I'm not even aware of, but I mean, in my view, TikTok. What I see all the time is like, Facebook groups. I don't know how many of those let's say 20 somethings are also on Reddit, that would be good to know. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think after Reddit, it's like TikTok or YouTube. But of course, YouTube, it takes time to make videos and doesn't always get traction and all of that. But in terms of one-stop shops, gosh, Reddit r/Subaru. That's where I would put it all. It'll show up on Google. You can start linking people to prior posts that you made. I've been preaching this to Dewey for probably 5 years. Slowly, quietly, in the shadows.
There you go. Well, in the meantime, if you end up doing any HPA courses, you get yourself on the forum, you have any questions, you're going to get an answer. So that is an option for now.
The HPA forums are awesome. They're just unfortunately above a lot of some of these guys' heads. But man, for somebody like me, it's amazing. Like we use the crap out of that. So, are you planning on bringing your Time Attack car back out anytime soon? What about your GLTC car? Like when are we going to see you again?
Good question. Hopefully I will have the GLTC car at CODA in 2 weeks.
Nice.
Hopefully this time with BMW ABS swap in it. So
very
be nice
excited to hear how that goes, because I need to do the same thing. So please keep me in the loop on that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a bit of an adventure. It was something I decided I didn't want to distract me from other things, so let me go with this guy who says he has a kit that he's used before on Subarus, and it'll definitely just bolt on and work, and we know how that goes sometimes. So,
are you talking about Barge?
No, that wasn't it.
Okay. Yeah, keep me in the loop. Very excited.
Yeah. So, basically we're going to make our own sensor adapters and make it work. But I will let you know how that goes.
We can help on our end with that. Again, let us know too. I know I'm probably going way past what I'm allowed to even say from where I sit. This is way above my pay grade. But I will fight tooth and nail to help with that if we need some manufacturing side of that. Okay.
Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you. It might come to that. I think with the sensors I figured out for the front, it's going to be a simple piece. We're just going to do quick on a plasma table, but I think for the rear, we might end up needing a machine piece. And if I do, I will let you know.
Yep. I mean, I see JJ typing something right now, and like I said, I might be overstepping my bounds, but it should be a fairly small piece. JJ's like, no, it should be a fairly small piece, and I'm hoping we can make them in a reasonably small run, and that would be massive for the entire track community, especially anybody using a GD style knuckle, being able to go to a BMW ABS sensor. That could change the world. So that would be, I needed that so bad at Laguna. Dude, I'm super stoked you're here. If somebody were to try to get a hold of you, they want to, talk to you about tuning, anything else, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure, yeah. I try to post some pictures of random things on Instagram at Innovative Tuning. I post a bit on my personal Facebook. Probably not much on my Innovative Tuning one, unfortunately. And then, if you actually want to hit me up about getting a car tuned or project planning, other electronics like dash calibration, PDMs, keypads, all that sort of stuff, tuning at innovativetuning.com.
Awesome. And I can't thank you enough for I know you're a busy guy, taking some time out of your day to come and chat with us. I'd really like to have you on again. Like I said, we've only kind of scratched the surface, and you gave us 2 hours of your time today, and again, I cannot thank you enough. This was super sweet, and I'd like to have you on again and chat more about this, especially maybe post CODA. I'd like to hear how ABS worked out and any stuff how that came and went, and maybe a rundown of what wheel to wheel racing with a Subaru is like. That would be fun. Again, and I also can't thank you enough for helping us out with getting this getting the the AOS is certified. That's going to be sweet. That's going to be huge on our part. I know just from me being a sales guy here, that's going to make my life a lot easier because I'd like to just be able to sell these to people in Cali or anywhere else that may be looking for a carb certification. So, yeah, it's been sick. So,
yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, the carb stuff's certainly a process, but I've been down the road and had a lot of success with Cobb on that, and we'll make it happen. But thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I would be happy to do it again another time. There's always more to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And if you ever get a chance, just pop into the chat. You're always welcome. I'll pull you up on stage anytime, man. So it's been good. We've got a lot of crazy tech stuff coming up, so I'm probably going to be bugging you for all sorts of different questions, PDM stuff, things of that nature, because we've got a lot we're about to do to Boogie, and you're one of the best minds to consult when I need it. I know you've always been right there to help me out when I need it, and I appreciate the hell out of it. So
yeah, I'd be happy to, man.
Sweet, man. Well, guys, this has been awesome. It has been kind of a long one, but I think it was we covered a lot of ground. This was great. I can't thank Mike enough for coming on. But yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. We're going to see you next week. I haven't checked the thing to see what we're talking about next week, but here soon, we're definitely going on a DCCD rant. That'll be a fun one. And yeah, it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. We'll see you guys next Thursday. Thanks.